Right then.
Should we get going?
Let's get going.
Hey everyone, welcome along to the Transplant Strong Podcast, and I am joined today by the legend that is Lisa. Hi Lisa, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, Danny. How are you?
Very, very good. I mean, we said we were going to have a catch up a while ago, but since you've come out of hospital, since you've had your second transplant on Christmas Day, and you've been busy since then, I know.
Yeah, busy recovering. And well, actually, do you know what? My transplant feels like it was a year ago. I was only in clinic yesterday, and Dr. Wong had to remind me that I was only like 11 weeks out, 10, 11 weeks out, because it really does feel like it was so much further ago than that. I think the second recovery, like second transplant, the recovery is very different. It's not that it's easier, but the bits like in the first transplant where I felt like my stomach was just going to burst open, or that the liver would unplumb itself somehow and become loose inside me, I realized that none of that was going to happen after the first one. And so the second one, I've been a lot more, I've haven't wrapped myself up in cotton wool so much, if you like.
You understood the sort of symptoms, and you understood everything that was going to happen afterwards, the foresight, I suppose.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I wasn't so scared to try and sleep on my side, Of course, like my stomach muscles were as they were the first time. They go through the same scar, all your muscles are shredded and whatever else. So like even just sitting up is, as you know, is extremely hard. And when you go from being in a hospital bed to your own bed, it's like, oh my goodness, this bed is totally flat, and you can, it hurts, and you need help to get yourself into the seated position and everything else. But for that side of the recovery, I've just found that side has been a lot easier. And because I've been immunosuppressed now for 3 years, none of that scared me. You know, when you start a new drug regime and there's a million different drugs and you've got to take them all at different times, and when you're very first transplanted, you're kind of like, how am I going to remember all of this? Whereas that was all old hat to me, and it was very similar regime to what I was on before the second transplant. So all of those things that are really daunting, I didn't really have to worry about this time, which definitely helped.
Yeah, and for the people that don't follow your story online, what led you? So you originally had a liver transplant. So what led you to having this second one?
So the same reason as the first one. So I've got PBC, primary biliary cholangitis, which is an autoimmune disease which attacks the bile ducts within the liver. My mum has the same, but she thankfully is responsive to the medication and will die with PBC rather than because of it, which is great. I was unresponsive to the medication, and I had a particular variant called ductopenia. So my bile ducts weren't just closing slowly over time like they do with PBC. They were disappearing completely. On one of the biopsies, there should have been something like 18 bile ducts, and there was 2. So they were just disappearing. It's the ductopenia actually has another name, and its other name is vanishing bile duct disease. So I had the first transplant, and then everything was really good for about a year after that. My liver settled really nicely. And all the function came back to normal. Had a blip with the kidneys, but we expect that with tacrolimus, and that settled as well. And then after about the first year, my function started going again, and I started itching again, and some of the symptoms lightly started to creep back in. And the first sign of any problems was that my body had started creating what they call donor specific, I can never say that word, I always say the ocean instead of the word.
I did that.
Yeah, I know, donor specific antibodies, so DSA they call it. So it's a slightly different type of rejection. So you have the rejection that they can just tweak your immunosuppressant drugs and it corrects itself, and then you have this donor specific antibody rejection, and I started to produce these antibodies, and they couldn't quite get it under control. And they did 2 or 3 biopsies, and then they realized actually that my PBC had also returned and it had woken up. So the liver was under 2 different types of attack. And they thought that they'd be able to keep everything going for about 2 to 5 years. In one meeting, they said, about 2 to 5 years, you're going to need another transplant. And then a month later, I was being expedited, having the assessment, was being put on the list and being told I was urgent. And then a month later, I was having my second transplant.
Yeah. And
it happened very quickly.
Yeah, and I was just about to say, like, I mean, we follow your stories online, or I do, I follow closely, and you seem very resilient and very strong, and you take it all in your stride, but no one wants to go through one transplant, let alone two. Like, what were your thoughts around all of this? Like, genuine thoughts, you know?
My genuine thoughts was I felt guilty. I felt so guilty towards my first donor's family, and because I have a really lovely relationship with my first donor's mum and dad, Sue and Mike, I felt I didn't actually put it online for a while because I needed to find a way to tell them before, because they follow me as well. I didn't want them to find out via Instagram. So for me, I was like, I'm fine, I can deal with this. I've been through it once, I can do it again. You know, I had the support of Justin and all my family and work and everything like that. So I wasn't really thinking about me. I was more thinking about my donor's family and thinking that because I was the only one that had said thank you to them out of the 8 people that he saved. And I knew that really hurt Sue. Not that it hurt her, but she just expected to hear from everybody. And I did explain that not everybody can find the words, not everybody even thinks about that. They could be from an older generation, and it's just different for different people, and not everybody survives a transplant either. So I have explained all of that, and so I just felt that because I'm the only one that has made contact, that for them I had a piece of Georgie, and then that was going to change. So I just felt so awful and so guilty. Not that there's nothing I could have done to have changed needing a second one, but that was, and I really battled with that. I really battled with it. And it you know, it really hurt. I had to say to them, I'm so sorry, but I have to have another transplant. And that time was going to come. And I felt like I was probably going to re-kick off their grieving process all over again. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I hadn't ever even thought of that. So it's very interesting, like, that you had that thought, and it's totally understandable as well.
It was just this guilt thing, a massive guilt. You know, like, you know how you get survivor's guilt, like lots of people get survivor's guilt. They have a transplant, it doesn't necessarily start straight away, or that at some point, whether it's just a very small point in time or whether it's something that really consumes you, the majority of us will have that, oh my goodness, you know, someone has died and I've survived. And we do have to remind ourselves that people don't die for us and, you know, give us an organ. They don't die to give us an organ. It's a tragic, awful thing that's happened anyway, but the hope and the amazing thing that's come from it is that they've registered or told their family and they've become an organ donor, and their legacy lives on. So to me it just felt like Georgie was passing away again, although I know it wasn't that. And actually it was Sue that actually put my mind at rest a bit, and she said to me, you know, that's not how I see it. I don't see the liver that's in you as Georgie. I see it as Georgie was a stepping stone to your future. And that settled it for me. Once she said that to me, I was like, okay, if that's how Sue sees it, that's how I need to see it. And it's true, without Georgie I wouldn't have had those extra 3 years of life, and I wouldn't have got to this point now. So he was that amazing stepping stone that allowed me to live longer.
That's so nice as well, that you have that contact and you could have that discussion with them, and then she could put your mind to rest and say that.
We haven't actually met yet. We were due to meet, I think it must have only been, gosh, about 2 weeks before the first call of the second transplant. We were due to meet. They were coming to my hometown. We'd arranged everything. The weather was getting really bad. I knew there was some flooding in their part of the country, so we decided to delay it. And then I was getting more and more poorly, and more yellow, and I know Justin had made contact with Sue and said, you know, I don't want you to be alarmed when you see Lisa, because what I looked like on Instagram was very different to what I looked like in real life. I was extremely skinny again, and I was literally a luminous yellow, and you could see it in Instagram towards the end, but not as vibrant, if you like, as it was in real life. So he did contact her and said, I don't want it to upset you, but she is visibly very poorly again now. And then the first call came on the 19th of December, which then led to the second and final call, which came on Christmas morning.
I noticed it. I could notice towards the end on your Instagram, and I was genuinely really worried, like, genuinely, like,
thank you.
And then, you know, afterwards you post that Oompa Loompas picture, you know, and
the
hepatologist, but it's having that ability to, I suppose, find some of the humour in it that keeps you going.
I think you need a bit of dark humor, don't you? And I
Yeah.
know it's not for everybody, but for me, it's what helps. And
Yeah.
I like to see the funny side of things. And I never mean to offend anybody. And if I do, I apologize wholeheartedly. But I need to have dark humor for
Yeah.
me. You know, we've been through a lot at the end of the
Yeah.
day,
There's a
and
lot
once
of
you've been
tears.
through it, yeah,
So
exactly.
you need to laugh sometimes, even if it
You
is at your own
do.
expense and your own health.
You do, you really do. And actually, the picture that I used within that joke was I just left King's. We were stood at the train station waiting to get the train back to Victoria into central London. And we'd taken a picture of Justin and I just to update everybody on what was going on. And I was extremely yellow in that particular picture. And we got on the train, and there was everyone stood up at Victoria because that's the end of the line of the overground. And there was two, I say kids, but they weren't. They must have been in their early 20s. And the girl looked at me and then cracked up laughing, stood back out of view. And I kind of was like, okay. And then the boyfriend or the friend, shouldn't assume, looked round to see what she was laughing at, and then he started cracking up. Luckily there was a few people between us and them, because Justin was not happy. I was like, just leave them to laugh, they're just uneducated, and that's
She probably just
okay.
thought you had a really bad fake tan. She probably didn't know
Yeah.
anything about
Yeah,
jaundice or anything. She's probably gone, wow, that woman's messed up her tan. Like,
yeah, totally messed up her tan.
yeah,
Yeah, exactly. But that hit hard, you know, to be laughed at like that. I was like,
yeah,
wow, that was a moment for me.
yeah,
But I was transplanted within 3 and a bit weeks of that. So
yeah,
but yeah, I've never, although I've been jaundiced before and I've been skeletal before, I've been stared at before. I've never been laughed at, and you know,
yeah.
in that context, and that kind of hit hard. And I was like, wow, because I would say to Justin, you know, does this color make me look more yellow? Because I was starting to change my clothes, I was starting to go out less because I was
Yeah.
noticing more stares. And he would always be lovely and just say, no, not at all. Come on, you look beautiful, you know, as they do, as any gentleman would. And yeah, so I'd go out as confidently as I could, and then something like that happens, and you just think, you know, it's just, maybe as a child I would have been as ignorant as that. I don't know, but you know, it's one of those
Yeah,
things, isn't it?
yeah. I mean, it's reflective on the other person and not on yourself. And
Absolutely, yeah.
I've had it before walking through the high street, and when
Have
I
you?
was ill, and yeah, like a group of lads just walked past and they said something, and then just kept walking, like, but it
Because it
happens,
stays with you
unfortunately.
though, doesn't it?
Yeah, 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 of course. Like even now, like if you're in a room that's got a mirror, but the walls are like slightly tinted, or my green bathroom, sometimes I like the light looks funny. I'm like, am I going like green?
Yeah, like you're checking your
Yeah,
eyelids.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those, isn't it? But I suppose until you're in that position where people may stare at you, um, you don't know what it feels like.
yeah, yeah.
One of those. One of
So
those.
to go back to the operation, so you said you have a scar already. So do they just take the direct line of that scar?
Yes, yeah. So as much as they can. So I've
Yeah,
got the Mercedes because I had a full liver transplant the first time and the second time.
yeah,
You tend to get a Lexus if you have a partial liver transplant. You know, like when they share the right lobe, left lobe,
yeah,
adult and child. So I've got Mercedes, and actually when I went for my assessment, I asked that very question: do you just use the same scar? And they said, yeah, absolutely. But of course, every time they cut, they need to fold the skin in slightly so they can sew it back up. So I've now got a wonky belly button. My scar goes this way, my belly button goes that way. There's a bit of a fold in there as well, so it's not as neat as it was the first time, but yeah, it's exactly the same scar. And they pre-warn you, they go through everything. They call it a redo. A second transplant to them is called a redo. And they say, obviously, I mean, the risks are super high anyway on the first transplant. They increase even more when you're going for a redo. And the length of surgery tends to increase, because not only have they got to recut you open, they've then got to work on all the scar tissue that's there as well before they even start the transplant. So they kind of like prepared us for all of that. And they said elements of the recovery would be new and different and harder, and elements would be easier, and that's exactly what I found. I was in IC for longer, the surgery was longer. Yeah, I think the whole process, it felt like a totally different operation, to be honest. It didn't feel like the same operation as the first time. So it just shows you actually that everybody, every recovery, every surgery isn't linear. And even if it's the same person having the same surgery, even that's not linear. It felt like two totally different things from the first to the second.
Yeah. And then, so it was Christmas Day, so we're now 3 months in.
Yeah.
And you're looking fantastic. Is that,
Thank you.
What's that down to? Just fresh air?
I think so.
Good
Fresh
lifestyle?
air. Yeah, you know me, I'm an outwardly positive person anyway, and I just like to crack on. That can be to my detriment sometimes. And like I said, Dr. One was only saying to me yesterday, you know, you're only 11 weeks out, slow down a bit, you know, you're pushing a bit too fast. So I do have to remind myself, and Justin reminds me, and my mum, who I see daily, because obviously I can't drive or anything still at the moment. So you know, I went out with mum this morning. I went out at 9:30 up to the car wash, you know, got a bacon sandwich, and then we went for a little stroll down the beach because the weather is glorious. And by about 11:30 I was grumpy Lisa. She was like, you've done too much, let's get you home. So yeah, so I feel like I can do a lot more than what I physically can at the moment. But I am about to start some physio because my back is being really bad. Thankfully, we did an MRI on the spine and my spine's absolutely fine. Her concern was a couple of fractures, because obviously you're on a hard slab for a long time, aren't you, when we have these kind of surgeries? So, but thankfully my spine was absolutely fine. But they're going to do some physio to help me get a bit of strength back, because I certainly couldn't. My job involves me sitting at a desk 9 to 5 pretty much. I couldn't sit for that long. Like even now I've got my heat cushion on behind me, possible, you know. I took some paracetamol before I sat here. So yeah, it's all about getting that strength back, isn't it? And that's the one thing that seems to be taking a little bit longer. But I guess I am 3 years older, and my body's already been through this once, so it is a big hit on my strength. I think that's probably the main thing I found more difficult.
Yeah, well, it's a huge trauma for the body, and then you got to think, you know, how ill you were obviously prior to having this second transplant. So it's such a long way to go.
Yeah, like this.
And
they actually did the test to see about the donor specific, see how much I struggle with that word, antibodies. They on the 1st of January, so 1 week after my transplant, and I'm already producing them again. But I am on 3 types of immunosuppression, all high dose, so we're just watching that at the moment. So their concern is how feisty my immune system is, and we were kind of hoping, now that I've reached 40, that it would have slowed down naturally as it would on its own. But yeah, like I say, they've done the tests and I am positive again for those antibodies, but now we've just got to keep the immunosuppression super high, and hope that we can just keep them at bay and stop them from producing too much, which will then go and cause damage to the liver. And we're just hoping that the PBC stays asleep. So we'll see what happens.
So you mentioned there that you're on 3 anti-suppressant meds. So
rejections,
that's right, anti-rejection. So what are those?
So they are what stops the body rejecting the organ. So they dampen the immune system. So and you mean what type? So prednisolone as in steroid, mycophenolate, and tacrolimus in Invasis.
Yeah, because the tac I'm on the Advocacy, that's what's quite common. But I didn't know that.
So I think most people are on tac. I think that the immunosuppressant that originated with transplant, it was cyclosporin, wasn't it? And there are a couple people who can't take tacrolimus, more than a couple, term of phrase, and they are still on cyclosporin. I'm sure it's called that.
The original.
Yeah, the original one, the original immunosuppression. So there is always that option if tacrolimus doesn't work, but there are different brands of tacrolimus, and then Invasis is a slightly different one where it's once a day. So you have like a higher dose once a day rather than splitting your doses out. Like, do you split your doses out? So you have some in the morning, some in the evening?
Just in the morning for me.
You're in a once a day now as well. So that's great, isn't it? So there's all different options, isn't there? for us to take, which is the magic of our consultants, our hepatologists, because I mean the cocktails that you hear that people are on, you just think, how do you figure out the cocktail that everyone needs? And dosing doesn't necessarily tell us about severity or anything like that. And I tend to not talk about the doses that I'm on my Instagram, because some people will hear, oh, they're on this dose, why aren't I on that dose? And dosing is different for everybody. It all depends on the disease you had in the first place, your age, your metabolism. I mean, there's so much that goes into our specialists arranging these cocktails for each of us, and everybody's is totally different for different reasons and other health ailments and things like that. So I'm not a fan really of disclosing dose amounts, because I think people can hold on to it and go, oh, well, that's not right, why am I on this amount, or am I not on enough? And I think it can get quite dangerous in a social media space when people start talking about how much of what they take, because I've seen it before now where people have gone, well, I might up mine then, because it's like, no, don't touch your don't touch your dosing. That's up to your consultant, and there's a reason why you're on what you're on and the amounts that you're on. So we're all different, aren't we, at the end of the day?
I've never thought about that, to be fair, but I never really, I just talk about, like you say, saying what meds I'm on, but not so much the dosage. So you've been in a hospital, but you've also been on telly.
Yes, I have. Back on Lorraine's couch.
How awesome is that? So it's the second time, but like, what's that experience like? So how did that come about?
They saw on Instagram that I'd had a second transplant. The first time I was on there was in 2023, and that was for Women of the Year. And that was for the work that I do for NHS Blood and Transplant and for the British Liver Trust, and raising awareness and being a support network to other people in a similar position. But one thing I didn't talk about when I was on that time, one, because I was totally blindsided and didn't know I was going to be on, probably a good thing, to be honest. I didn't talk about myself, and that's because it wasn't about me, it was about the charity. So they didn't actually know at that point I was actually quite poorly and I was declining again. And we just carried on doing whatever we were doing and raising awareness. Then Lorraine saw on my Instagram that I'd had a second transplant on Christmas Day. So they contacted Justin and said, once Lisa's a bit better, would you be willing to come back on and give us an update? And to me and Justin, that was an opportunity to go back on and talk about the British Liver Trust, rare liver disease and organ donation. So of course we said absolutely, and they were super flexible, because obviously very early days still of recovery. So we tied it in with a visit to King's when I was going up to London anyway. And went back on and had a chat and talked about all those important things, and raised some more awareness and spread the word about leaving your loved ones certain.
Yeah, that's so cool. It's so good that you get these opportunities to do that. I mean, obviously you'd rather not have any opportunities, you wouldn't want to go through it at all, but the fact that you are using your platform and your experience to not only tell your story and sort of help people that are going through it, but also, like you say, to encourage other people hopefully to become donors.
Well, and that's what it's all about, isn't it? Like you and I, we've both been in that position where you're waiting for that life-saving transplant, and that is going to save a life, change a life, improve a life. And it's not a nice place to be. I saw a phrase earlier and it said, waiting for a transplant you learn patience, receiving a transplant you learn gratitude. And I think that is so true. It's so true. And you do the same, Danny, just by doing these podcasts and things. People who maybe don't want to show themselves on Instagram, but are in the background, they never post, but they're just in the background, and they're looking for people talking about this kind of stuff. And just by you designing these amazing tops and jumpers and t-shirts and all the other bits that you do now, and by doing your podcast and sharing your own story, however someone talks about their own story, all of it is aware someone's watching somewhere. And if just one person feels less alone going through what we've been through, or if one person thinks, I would like to be an organ donor if I can be, and they go and sign the register, or they have a conversation that night at dinner, that is life changing, it's life saving. And the more anyone who feels comfortable enough to talk about their experience, the more they do that, the more lives, like, as a community, we can help and save. And I think it's just super important. And for me, it's about giving back. I've had my life saved twice now, and that's two families which have gone through the most horrific thing ever. And that's two donors who and including your donor. That's 3 donors, 3 families who have decided to do the most selfless thing. And because of that, you and I are sat here having a conversation today. It's amazing, really.
Yeah, it is amazing. And it sort of, I was just going to mention earlier when we were talking about letters to and from the donors, and you said that lady hadn't received one. I sent one to my donor's family and I haven't received one back. And Hannah and I were talking about it. And but I said, you know, I didn't send one to receive one. And I said to Hannah, I said they've done the most important part, which was put in their you know, it was a young son who had obviously said that he would be a donor, and for them to agree to that, you know, that's more than enough for me.
It's amazing. Yeah. I think when we write our letters of thanks, that isn't for us, is it?
No,
It's for them. We're thanking
definitely.
them, and it's lovely if you hear back, you know, but if you don't, you can have that peace in knowing that you've done the right thing. Whether they've opted to receive it or not, you've done the right thing. And also, like I said to Sue, she could still hear from some of the other recipients. For me, before my first transplant, I'd already decided with myself I was going to write, and I was going to do it at 6 months. For me, that was just that's just what I decided. I know people who've waited 2 years, 5 years, 10 years to write a letter. So I have said to her, there's still an opportunity. She still might get a phone call one day to say that a letter's been received for her. And you still might get a phone call one day to say that a letter's been sent. You just don't know. And people just need to do things that are right for them at the right time for them. And as long as we, like you, don't do something to receive something in return, but to give our thanks for something so selfless, and then just forget about it and just try and park it and leave it. If something comes back one day, then that's great, but if it doesn't, that's okay too, right?
Yeah, I kind of don't know how I'll be emotionally if I had a letter through the door, to be fair.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
It
is a tough one. I remember when mine arrived, and I just left it for a little bit. I didn't know what to do, because I didn't know what I was going to open. You know, I knew it was going to be okay, and it was going to be nice because the hospital wouldn't send it on otherwise, because obviously they check them and they make sure it's anonymous and all the rest of it. But it's a tough one. You just don't know. You don't know how you're going to feel. You can plan all these things, can't you? But you don't necessarily know how you're going to feel. I like, even to write mine, I don't know about you, but it took a good 10 drafts, and in the end I ended up switching from paper to a card, so my space was limited and I just had to get it in there. So I don't know how you found writing that letter.
I did definitely a few drafts, and I, like you, I kind of had a time frame in my head roughly. Well, not really a time frame, but I just wanted to do some stuff and then be able to report back on like all the things that I've been able to do since having that transplant.
That's nice.
But it was also a catch-22, because I didn't want to, it felt like it is the hardest thing you will ever write. And I know everyone says this, because I didn't want to write a letter where it's like, I'm doing all these amazing things, but you haven't got a son, you know, it's really hard. It's
really tough. I think I've had people say to me before, because mine was also, my first donor was a young lad. He was 23 years old. How old was your donor?
Same, 22, 23.
And I've had people say to me, that must be really hard, probably harder. And I'm like, no, I don't think so, because Georgie was someone's son. But even if my donor was a 60-year-old, you know, woman, that would be someone's grandma potentially. These donors have got loved ones, and I think it's difficult no matter what. And just the fact that we can understand that, I think, just shows that we're human, and how much gratitude we've got, and how much we appreciate our donors and their families. They're just amazing people at the end of the day.
Selfless, very selfless.
Well,
what's the year ahead like, as long as you're stable in your liver and everything like that? What's the year ahead?
What's the year ahead? I don't know. I'm hoping by half year, potentially a return to work, if I can get the strength in my back. That would be ideal. We've got a house move coming up. Obviously, I'm not lifting, I'm pointing and
delegating. Nice.
Labeling and pointing and delegating. And I hope to get traveling again. You know, it's go and do all those things. I often speak to people who have a transplant, become immunosuppressed, because it is like switching one disease for another, let's face it. And then they recluse themselves. And the first transplant, I did that a bit, but that was through COVID. So there was, you know, heightened, like you were hypervigilant to all that kind of stuff. But this time I'm getting out there more because I've been given life. So go and use it, right? And you're brilliant at that. You're so great at just going and grabbing life. And I think that's really inspirational. And I love the fact that you share your holidays and your business ventures and, you know, all the bits that you and Hannah do. I think it's just brilliant. And I think it's super important as recipients that we go out there and we live life. We take precautions, mask where we need to mask, hand wash where we need to hand wash, and, you know, all the rest of it. Avoid people with colds and, you know, the general advice, but just get out there and grab life. And you know, I think it's so important not to recluse yourself, because what's the point? What's the point? You know, go out there, live the legacy of your donor, and go and enjoy everything you wanted to enjoy before you got poorly.
Yeah, that's what I quite often think. It's like, what would this 20-odd-year-old lad, you know, sort of, he'd be happy to be out doing stuff and trying to get as much done as possible. Yeah,
and it's also not about, like, this might sound, I don't know how to word this without it saying wrong, but I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. And, you know, you're not going out there to live for your donor either. You can't put that on you, because that's heavy. But it is about going, I can't let life pass me by because someone else has lost theirs and I've got an opportunity to live mine. So it's, you know, you've just got to just go and love life, love those around you, enjoy what you can, because you never know what's going to happen. I certainly didn't expect 3 years down the line to be sat here, you know, on transplant number 2. Like you said earlier, you never expect a transplant in the first place, do you? But then to get poorly again, even though they tell you it can return, like, depending on the reason for transplant, especially with autoimmune, they pre-warn you. They even said to me, I think once, I'll probably need 3 transplants in my lifetime, but I heard that and it went straight out. So when it came to the second one, I was a bit like, oh, they did pre-warn me of this, actually. And I didn't believe them. So you just never know what's going to happen, right?
Yeah. Well, it's always interesting talking to you, Lisa.
And you, always. Thank you, Danny.
We'll let you get some rest.
Thanks. Am I looking tired?
No, not at all. I didn't mean that.
You sound like my mother.
Yes. You need to rest. You need to go and sleep. You're looking tired now.
You've done too much.
You've been out all day. No, I just sit here and chat with you all afternoon as well. And, I know. And it's, you know, you got stuff to do.
That's all good. Thanks for inviting me back on, as always.
No problem, Lisa. We'll speak soon.
Speak soon. Take care.
Bye-bye.